If you watch telly between the 70s and 80s, this tune will mean only one thing. Famous for his comedy chases, Benny Hill was one of Britain's most loved and arguably most successful comedians.
He was so lovable on the box. People warmed to him.
Benny Hill had a sort of twinkle in his eye.
That's part of success, you know, if you like the personality.
Though largely associated with ITV, Benny's TV career actually began with the BBC.
He was writing really for other people, and when he acted out the sketches in a meeting with the head of the department of the BBC, he said, well, who do you think would be good at this? He said, oh, I don't know, so-and-so, so-and-so. And the guy said, I think you would be.
He got on television and he became the first comedian really made by television.
And in 1955, The Benny Hill Show was born.
Benny Hill!
It was a mix of sketches, comic characters and comedy songs.
Benny was of his time, steeped in the traditions of the old-fashioned music hall and variety.
You're on! You're on! I am.
Benny Hill was of that wonderful school of comic.
Try that one over there. Go on.
Inoffensive humour, just very, very funny.
In 1969, The Benny Hill Show moved to ITV and became a mainstay of Thames television for the next 20 years. With its fanfare and fairground-like titles, Benny's funny characters, including the obligatory comedy vicar, won him a BAFTA and a Golden Rose of Montreux.
Benny Hill was better, for want of a better word, than a lot of people thought, I think, because every now and again there would be some sketch which was really imaginative.
Spell weather.
W-E-T-H-E-R-E.
That's the worst spell of weather we've had all year, I think.
At its peak, the show attracted an audience of 21 million, but by the 70s, the humour leaned heavily on innuendo.
His humour was comparable to the carry-on humour. Of course, yes, he was making fun of bosoms, bottoms and goodness knows what, but in those days, people laughed at that, and it was all taken in good fun.
I was involved in the Benny Hill Show for about 14 years. It was a lovely family atmosphere. We all had a great time, and it was very hard work, but there was an awful lot of fun involved as well.
I used to do the Mr. Scuttle thing with him, which I think was particularly funny.
Well, Mr. Scuttle, I feel that I should tell you now.
Yes, sir?
It's out.
They called him Ernie.
A much-loved element of the show were Benny's comedy songs.
Milk cart in the West.
I mean, when you think of Ernie, the fastest milkman in the West, which he wrote, and when he did it in the show, I said to Benny, I said, that's a great number. You could capitalise on that.
She said she'd like to bathe in milk. He said, all right, sweetheart. And when he'd finished work one night, he loaded up the cart. He said...
But that was a fabulous piece of theatrical entertainment. And, of course, the song became very successful. I think it went to #1 in the hit parade.
That tickled old Ernie. And he drove the fastest milk cart in the West.
There were many sketches involved in Benny's show where they were a little bit risque and some would class a little bit naughty.
By the 1980s, a regular feature on the show was the scantily clad Hill's Angels.
Everything was done so much tongue-in-cheek. We never felt demoralised in any way. No one ever had to do anything they didn't want to do. If you had your skirt ripped off, it was never a problem.
IVOD!
It was always done with a smile on one's face.
My theory has always been that he could have been a much more inventive comedian if he hadn't gone the smutty route and got himself known for the girls on the show rather than him.
He was just no longer in tune with the times, and what he was thinking were glamour girls in old sort of theatre reviews. It just now looked really wrong.
Britain was now in the throes of social change, and a new breed of comic entered the scene.
During the 1980s, of course, it was alternative comedy and people were very down on anything that was sexist, which maybe people hadn't recognised before. And so Benny was really sort of not on the same page.
By then, there had been a sea change in comedy. More kind of hipster youngsters in tight trousers making jokes about Mrs. Thatcher.
There's lots of things on telly that offend me. I mean, you know, like when a comedian can end every single programme tearing off a woman's clothes and then chasing her around a park in her underwear, like that, for me, in a world where women can't even walk safe in the parks, is pretty worrying.
It certainly did become outdated. He said mentally he'd always stayed about 17 years old. Well, that looks increasingly not quite right the older you get, and he's still surrounded by all these scantily clad women.
In the end, his perceived sexism and the fact that, you know, girls running around in high heels being leered at became unacceptable.
At a certain time, when everything was non-racist, non-sexist, he became like one of those donkeys fake donkey that you hit with a stick.
Benny's comedy was now a target, and in 1988, the Broadcasting Standards Council denounced the show as increasingly offensive. Despite the criticism, Benny's shows were still pulling in 9.5 million viewers and were exported to over 100 countries worldwide, including America.
Benny Hill was popular all around the world.
The shows were shown worldwide, even as far as, you know, the Far East, Australia, America.
Talk to Americans at that time. Oh, I love your Benny Hill. He's really funny.
In 1989, Benny had returned triumphant from the Cannes TV Festival and was looking to tie up a deal for a new series when he was called to Thames Television with his long-term producer, Dennis Kirkland, for a meeting.
He was brought into the office of the head of Light Entertainment. It was John Howard Davis, the man who had produced Fawlty Towers.
After 20 years with Thames, Benny was told there was to be no more shows.
He was top of his game. I imagine he didn't see it coming.
Benny was absolutely devastated. He felt that his whole world had fallen apart.
And everybody was mortified.
It was so drastic and dramatic.
People in charge of TV companies are pretty ruthless.
He thought he was going along to be congratulated because the Benny Hill show had raked in millions of pounds revenue for Thames Television. That interview lasted apparently 5 minutes. He walked in the door, sat in an office and was told, "Thank you, Mr. Hill, but we are axing your show."
Surely you talk to the comedian and say, "We've got to watch it. Times are changing."
The way they then treated him, this man who made millions for Thames Television, was dropped like a stone.
No one said anything. All Benny received was pats on the back. "Great show, Benny. Good stuff, Benny. We love you, Benny."
I was so sad for Benny because he loved his work. I mean, it was everything to him.
He spent his whole life dedicated to wanting to make people laugh.
His shows have never been shown in this country again. Surely they could have shown some of them with the ones they didn't like, which they thought were politically incorrect, edited out, and we gave the best of Benny Hill. But he was so hurt by it that he went into a decline.
In 1992, 3 years after Hill was ditched by Thames Television, the world of comedy lost a legend.
2 days after the death of Frankie Howerd, fans are mourning the death of another great comic, Benny Hill. He died of a heart attack at his flat in southwest London.
I think deep down, a lot of people think that the stress, the upset, the anxiety contributed towards Benny's ill health, which eventually led to his death.
I think it must have been an awful blow when your whole life, 40 years of your life, you've been at the top of your tree and then suddenly, boom, it's over.
I miss Benny terribly. It was 14 years of wonderful time of my life. And if I had the clock and I could turn it back and do it all over again, I would.